Chinese into English. So we are very sorry to save the time. We do not provide English to Chinese translation. So the English part will be in English only, and the Chinese part, for those who don't understand Chinese, please come to the staff members at the facilities that you can listen to the English translation. Thank you.
Prepare some snacks for you, just in case. We're very honored to have these two very special guests to speak about this very special exhibition in Hong Kong. They really do not need much introduction, but I'll just briefly introduce them. Professor Boris Groys, one of the most celebrated figures in the West in art theory, philosopher, and professor. And many of you, I'm sure, have seen his books or maybe read it also in translation. Professor Chen传兴is probably less well known in Hong Kong, but in my opinion, he's one of the finest intellectual in the Chinese art world. Yes, he's from Taipei. He's a publisher. He's a founder of a very high-quality publishing house called 行人出版社. He was a professor at Tsinghua University in Taiwan before he retired. He's a photographer and documentary filmmaker. And some of you may remember his documentary series of Taiwan poets and writers. And some of these were launched in Hong Kong. 大家好，今天晚上很欢迎你们来，因为这个是晚饭时间，所以可见来这里的人都是对文化看得比物质生活比较重的。那么这个晚上呢，两位很重要的嘉宾，Boris Groys 先生大家可能都知道，因为他的书也很多参与成为中文。这一次能够有Boris Groys 还有陈传兴两位一起来对话，是一个特别好的机缘。因为陈传兴教授，他从台湾过来，对叶世强先生的生活背景还有思想背景会有一个不同的见解。陈教授在我的心目中是中文世界里面一个我最钦佩的一个知识分子。他也是个艺术家，他也是一个出版人，他有一家叫行人出版社的出版公司，专门出一些很难读的，可是也很少人愿意出版的书。那么今天我就希望他们两个对叶世强的作品还有这个展览方面提出一些想法。So without further ado, perhaps we start with Professor Groys.
First, encounter with the work of Ye Sichang. I have here some notes, and I will follow these notes, but it's not the real text. This first impression was very strong. We were together in Taipei, and we went to the apartment of the artist that was very ascetic, very modest, at the same time somehow artistically organized in a kind of minimalist way. Yeah, not minimalist in a formalist way, but minimalist in the spirit. And after I looked at a big selection of his work, I had an impression that this atmosphere of asceticism and modesty, and at the same time typical for an ascetic attitude, kind of metaphysical claim that is that lives in his works, and that works let us feel, that kind of corresponds very well to his lifestyle. He's an example of this correlation between life and art, yeah, a kind of unity between art and life that modernist artists always try to achieve, but only few of them could really achieve. So I achieved some kind of attitude that would be a common attitude in the life practice and the artistic practice. Now I would like to comment on the work of him from some kind of outside position. Of course, I am not grown up in the Chinese tradition, and I don't know the context of Chinese art well enough. So, my consideration that I would, with which I would open this discussion, is a kind of formalist one. I in general not a formalist in my attitude, but here I would like to be a bit formalist, simply because of lack of knowledge of the context. Now, if you look at the history of painting in general, from the beginning to the end, from the beginning to our time, then there is one dominating problem dominating and structuring of this history. It is a relationship between object and background, between the thing and the space around this thing. If we look at the European and Western tradition, it is obvious that the human person and also individual object are always in the center of the painting and dominate the painting. It is something that is very obvious if you go through the Western museums, throughout the whole history, maybe up to early modernity. You always see an object that can be human beings, that can be an animal, that can be a chair, that can be a table with fruits, but it's always something that is the center and dominates the space, and the space recedes to a background, and it is perceived as relatively insignificant. If you look at the Chinese painting and Chinese painting tradition, it's obvious that individual human figures and also things, objects and trees and animals are inscribed in the bigger, greater context. So what you see in the Chinese tradition is obviously domination of the space over the individual objects. These objects always are, so to say, taken in the context and the mode of their existence in the bigger space. Now it is well known that this kind of, let's say, Eastern, especially Chinese attitude to the relationship between object and space has very heavily influenced modernist painting in the West from its beginnings in the late 19th and beginning of 20th century. If we look at history of Western painting and Western modernism from the Impressionist on, we see this gradual but inexorable dissolution of the object in the space. Already in the Impressionists, you see that objects lose their independence. Even more, they lose their independence and their domination over the space in Cubism. And at a certain point in time, they are completely dissolved in the space. That is actually abstract art. If you follow, for example, if you ever visited the exhibition of Mondrian, retrospective of Mondrian, retrospective of Kandinsky, retrospective of Malevich, so the beginning of European avant-garde, you see this process. It always begins with an object in the space, and this object dissolves. At the end, it completely merges with the abstract space. So, in European Western tradition, this confrontation with the East came to a choice between object and space. It is modern. So at the beginning, space of abstraction made a choice. It is a space of preferring space of object, space of contemplation, space of nothingness, and complete solution of danger and possibility. Only from this perspective, we look at the we see that he keeps this tension between object and space. Not in all of these works, not at all of these paintings, but I am personally most impressed by the painting where this tension is still there, like, for example, the paintings that you can see. You could see from my position if you wouldn't look at me, but look backwards. Here, the tension between individual object and space is there. Yeah? The object is not dissolved in the space, and also it doesn't dominate the space. It becomes to be, let's say, lost in the space. Yeah? It's always small object. It's always small figure that seems to be immersed, but at the same time endangered by a kind of visual infinity, yeah, of a space that is not a natural space anymore. It's not a space in nature of traditional Chinese painting, I would say. It is rather a metaphysical space. It is modernist space. It is space of abstraction. It is a space of politics, space of logic, space of contemplation, space of nothingness, space of danger and possible redemption. So it is a kind of abstract space, maybe religious space, maybe a metaphysical space. And every figure is kind of lost in the space, and this losing itself in the space is a combination between danger and promise, yeah, between negative and positive outcome. It's not accidental that these paintings that I have in mind were painted at the end of his life, yeah, in the last decade of his life. As he, so to say, moved, maybe not toward death, yeah, but toward to a different world. And so we have this kind of insistence on a tension, and dramatic tension, even dramatic tension, between object and abstract space, with a kind of existential anxiety. Yeah, for me, his paintings are not serene. Yeah, they look like being maybe purely peaceful and full of contemplation. They are. But at the same time, there is a kind of existential anxiety in them. There is a kind of feeling of extreme tension and ambiguity in a relationship between, let's say, human existence, yeah, finite human existence, and the vast, ingraspable world, yeah, in the middle of which this human existence takes place. So I was really impressed, yeah. So if I think about by what I was impressed by this kind of very rare combination between pure contemplation and existential anxiety. That is, of course, this combination has something religious in its source. Yeah? It is a tradition that is not necessarily artistic tradition. It is not decorative tradition. It is not tradition that relates to the beauty, yeah, or some kind of aesthetic ideal. It is rather a tradition that brings us back to the question of the fate of subjectivity. Yeah? It's the fate of individual subjectivity in the world, and in the world as it is, on the real world and metaphysical world. So it seems to me that he is not only one of the rare artists who could combine art and life in one attitude, but also that this attitude in a certain way summarize, for me even, this modernist impulse, this modernist impulse, serious modernist impulse of human existence versus abstract space. That is our situation. That is our situation of late modernism, and I think he quoted and summarized and expressed it in a very poignant and also evident way.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Boris. The paintings we are seeing in this exhibition here, and also the ones we saw when we went to the studio, I remember you mentioning that climbing up that 6th flight of stairs was like visiting studios in Moscow in the 70s. And it was an effort. And also, it reflects an earlier era because Ye Shiqiang somehow had shunned exhibitions most of his life. And when we visited him, it was really just the start of the possibility of him showing, because he had resisted it all his life. And as a biographical background to him, it is also interesting that most of the works you see here are made in the last 20 years, 2 decades. However, the dilemma is that he's somebody who was born in 1927, and he has traversed several eras. And some of these eras, for example, he passed through, he was born in China, he went to school in Guangzhou. He was actually educated by the famous nationalist ink painter Gao Jianfu, although he studied oil painting in the Guangzhou Art Academy. And then when he decided to want to go see the world in 1949, he ended up in Taiwan. And in 1950s, his favorite teacher was executed because of this anti-communist terror in Taiwan. So he was somebody who was lost in a gap in between. He was neither on the side of the Republican China or the People's Republic of China. So he was caught out by both of these. And then his art, there's also another dilemma. When he came, when this show was displayed, an ink painting expert, a very good collector, who was very enthusiastic when he saw the images from internet, got very upset. He said, how can somebody do these things which are totally split personality? They are not by the same person. And had assured him that they were this. Ye Shiqiang was the same Ye Shiqiang. Ye Weili is only the photographer. So it is that dilemma. And then another dilemma is the fact that a lot of these paintings, as you both pointed out when we had the conversation before, he had this very strong sentimentality, almost saccharine sweet sentimentality. But then there's this interest, but then there's this also obsession with this absolute purity, almost fascistic type of obsession with this kind of thing. So it is these dilemmas which we're trying to actually expose in the show. And I remember you mentioning comparing him to experience of abstract art in the 50s, 60s, 70s in Europe. And it might be interesting to explicate in the background of that history.
Well, first of all, he reminded me of my Soviet young years in the 70s in many ways. Indeed, I had this experience of going to the 6th, 7th, 8th floor without elevator, to visit the ateliers in Moscow artists. And if I look back at this Moscow artist, And why they never shown their work for a very long time? For example, Kabakov, his work is now shown in Art Power Station in Shanghai. Actually, he didn't show his work for 35 years, and many other artists for that time. And Johnson mentioned this kind of Republican socialist China divide. I would say it was the same. If I look at the political position of this artist, they didn't want to be communist and they didn't want to be anti-communist. And that was the real reason for them not to be shown. Because they were not be shown in the Soviet Union because they don't want to be communist, but they were also at that time were not shown in the West because they didn't want to be anti-communist. They want to escape this opposition and deconstruct this opposition. So I don't think that this gesture of purity is a question. I think that is an attempt to escape the necessity to take a certain position. Yeah? If you're living in a society in which you are put under pressure to make a choice, you must do it. Yeah? But there are people who didn't want to do it. I was such a person in the Soviet Union, and Kabakov was such a person. And you feel yourself alone, very much alone, because the world around you is divided, but you do not belong to any camp. And so suddenly, you began to be very lonely. I discussed that with Jacques Derrida all the time, yeah? And he said he was also in a situation at the beginning of his career to choose between Gaullism and communism. Yeah, he didn't want to do that. And his deconstruction, his philosophy was an attempt not to do that, to escape that, and to open the vast abstract space of possibilities, yeah, in which you are actually alone. So it seems to me, and that is maybe not sentimentality, this feeling of loneliness, I do not think it's sentimental or emotional. I said existentialist because I think this sense of loneliness is artificially constructed. It's actually, you produce this loneliness through your personal politics. It's not like you're caught in this situation, it's not like you are abandoned, it's not like you are caged, yeah. You just choose this situation of being alone in the world as a tool not to be subjected to one of the oppositions that rules this world. So it's always a conscious strategy. And it's always a conscious strategy that is, for me, the most interesting strategy, retrospectively looking, in the 20th century, to escape the opposition between figurative, non-figurative, to escape the opposition between socialist and bourgeois, to escape the opposition between nationalism and internationalism. And if you look at this painting, yes, European avant-garde in the European 60s, but I would say that this abstract space, non-natural space, yeah? That is the space of European and American modernism. That is what begins with, I don't know, Mondrian and ends with Barnett Newman. And I would say some Barnett Newman and some Rothko can be found also here. But found not as an object of imitation, but found as a reference. Yeah? So if you have a figure, human figure, figure of the tree, confronted with this modernist space, you have a reference to the space, yeah? So that the spectator can understand what you actually want to say. He is lonely, but he is very articulate. Whatever image you see, you clearly understand what's all about. What he wants to say, it's never unclear. I like this. I like this ascetic attitude, but also I like this artificially constructed loneliness, and also this power of clear articulation. That is not so widespread, especially contemporary art. Contemporary art want to be confused. It want to be also confused and confusing. And whatever, I meet artists all the time. And what they do is unclear. And I ask them, why you are so unclear? And the answer is always, it's because I want to be understood on very different levels. I have different levels of meaning. If I try to express one meaning or two meanings or whatever, maybe some people wouldn't like me. I want that my work will be liked for everybody, and everybody would project his or her own meaning in this work. Yeah? So they think that the work is good when it's as confused and confusing as possible. Yeah? And so it is, it is really dominating mood, there's no question about that. So it is really a good experience to see somebody who doesn't want to confuse, he doesn't want to sell by the means of confusion, but who express himself clearly. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. Yeah, that very actually agreeable attitude for me.
Thank you very much, Professor Groys. 传兴兄，
你刚才Boris教授已经就从一种现代主义，从政治，从这个20年代的 Malevich constructivism， 一直讲到这个60年代的，可能就是法国的这个 Chauffas 这些这个，以及所谓的这个 object and space。那我想我就跳开，我就从另外一个我自己的生命的角度，也就是稍微补充一下，就Johnson刚才在讲，就是说，因为事实上叶先生叶老师在我们这个年纪，我们这个 generation 的，也就是1952年出生的，19年代出生的，年代人来讲，在70年代、60年代，叶先生呢，就是台湾那个时候呢的一批，就是所谓的南来的，就是从这49年以后政治的这个大变化之后呢，流落到台湾，或者说被放逐到台湾的一些艺术家的其中的一位。最为 obscure 的，最为这个所谓的幽暗的，最为不被人认知的，相较于其他的，比如说像李宗盛老师，他就是一个很重要的台湾现代绘画。刚才Boris先生一直在讲的这个所谓的 modernism， 或者所谓的 modernity 等等的，在这个李宗盛先生就是影响了台湾的东方画派，就是东方画会，这是50年代到60年代这台湾最重要的这样的。那有非常多人呢到他的这个工作室画室去学，可是叶世强先生完全不一样。叶世强先生呢，基本上他是以一个所谓的隐藏的。一种比较像隐士一样的，他把自己藏在一个就是说非常的荒郊野外，因为他住的地方呢，各位很难以想象，那时候去是要花蛮长的时间，先坐bus，然后接着你要坐渡船，是要坐渡船，然后摇过去这样，所以对很多那时候在跟他学的人来讲，他们事实上是每次去他那里的时候，那个过程呢。其实是有一种朝圣，还有一种进化的 因为事实上是走过湾潭，完全是一种南方的，就是这个魏晋南北朝6朝的时候，那时候南方的一种山水的一种境界这样子。所以其实他把自己就营造了一个非常的这种所谓像禅的、像隐修的一种状态，刚好跟李宗盛呢，他在彰化，是台湾的南部，他在一个咖啡厅里面教南部乡下的咖啡厅，那这当然是非常的现代，那一面喝着咖啡，然后你知道他怎么教画李宗盛？那咖啡厅是暗的。你根本看不到的，所以所有人呢，跟他的学生把他们的作品带过去的时候，那么暗，他怎么看？所以他要讲什么？其实说真的讲，这里面一定有很奇怪的交往。那叶老师呢，那就更奇怪了，因为跟着他的人来讲，事实上我刚才提到了，事实上有点像在修行这样子。所以过去的时候。去他那边呢，他会跟你讲非常多的，可能一些他自己喜欢的，跟南怀瑾老师或者他自己读的一些禅的书，那也可能呢，他会弹他的古琴，这样。所以基本上呢是完完全全的一种退回到另外一种的，也就是我们可以这样讲，前现代 （pre-modern）。一种就跟中国的传统大传统的一个世界，所以在这个大传统的里面呢，它很奇怪的，也偏偏有很多在画油画、画西方绘画的人呢，会喜欢跟着他学。所以这里面也就是刚才江生讲的一种所谓暧昧性，或者刚才 Boris 讲里面那种 confusion， 一种所谓的一种混乱、混淆。其实对他来讲，这都不重要。比如说，像刚才各位在这里看了他的绘画，有很多我们看了会觉得，江生讲说像法国的抒情抽象这种所谓的这个很 lyric 的这种 école de Paris 这种巴黎画派的这种抒情抽象，它也有很多有点像巴内纽曼的 White in the White。也有像这种所谓的这种 color field 的这种色场的这种等等的，对他来讲，他事实上并没有一个统一的语言。事实上，他到底为什么画？他到底从哪里画？事实上，我们唯一知道他的一个师承，他是来自于岭南画派，从高剑户。那我们知道岭南是在中国。从传统中国绘画里面要走出一条新的路，里面的第3条路。前面我们讲有黄宾虹，有所谓的李可烂。那岭南的这一派呢，事实上是把日本的这整个的南画，日本的他们吸收的西洋的，转化成为日本自己绘画走出来想要走的一条。所谓的中国的新的所谓的中国绘画，这是一个大的传统，在面对西方的这种冲击之下走的路，这样。叶世强他是跟着岭南，所以时间很短，因为随着战乱，他就到了台湾这样子。这里面我们当然看到有非常多的岭南的这种修辞的这种方式，但岭南并没有告诉他。这些很复杂、非常丰富的这些所谓色彩的这些 pictorial space， 没有这些所有的这些色彩都不是我们所熟悉的中国传统绘画里面所看到的色彩。这色彩到底从何而来？它其实完全不现代，但你要讲它完全不现代。你也不能讲它完全的不现代，它事实上是在否定里面寻求一个他自己的现代。所以在这里面，我刚才一直听这个 Boris 以及就 Johnson， 他们一直要想放在一个所谓冷战的氛围， 或者一种所谓政治的这一种所谓的共产、法西斯或国家主义等等的，在整个大的这种所谓政治论述的这种角度来看叶世强的绘画，但对我来讲，我觉得这整个冷战的氛围，对叶世强来讲，那只是一个背景。我在这里并不是讲说他透过他的创作，他想要得到一种所谓的逃避、一种保护，或一种所谓的南来的很多人讲的，就是说一种避难的那种心态，并不是。我倒觉得反倒是相反，他这些的艺术创作，其实对他来讲，他是一个建构一个他自己独特的生命世界 （life world）。他一个非常特殊的生命世界，所以只要从这个生命世界里面去看的话，那我们可以比较容易去了解他那里面为什么这个人又可以画水墨，又可以写书法，然后更奇怪了，他又可以做古琴。我借用一个 Levi-Strauss 的一个概念 ，Levi-Strauss 有一个很有名的概念，他是讲一个 primitive 的这个原始部落有语言文化里面的一个很重要 ，bricolage 就是用手动手，然后把所有手边能够拿到的东西呢，去拼凑在一起。叶世强的绘画，叶世强做的古琴，事实上他都是捡到什么材料他就去做，他动手去拼凑去做出来这些呢，事实上是充分的符合了这个所谓的前现代的当代这一种所谓 bricolage 的这一种，所以在这里我们就可以看到，所以他去寻求的这些色彩里面呢，其实比较接近的时候，其实是比较接近他做的古琴跟他弹的古琴的里面的很特殊的中国的音乐的中国的声音的音场里面的 tonality， 也就是说，它这些色彩的色调，其实是里面回响的，是很特殊的。所以，刚刚今天下午我跟 Johnson 在聊，他就特别提到他做的古琴。那 Johnson 找了一个香港的朋友来谈，然后他说他朋友讲他的古琴做得非常好，对呀，虽然就是表面看起来不是很新、很粗糙，但他声音非常具有古琴应该有的，有一种时间性在里面，有一点像我现在自己的嗓音一样，非常的沧桑，非常的沙哑，有一种 age， 有一种好听叫古意，不好听叫熟成，这样子。所以其实我们看这些色彩，其实我们讲大家都应该同意，这色彩不是纯的色，它所有的色其实都是混淆的，就好像它要有很多颜色或同一种色调，同一个颜色，它也是要把它盖住，一直盖住。它好像一直在对于这种所谓 pure 纯粹，或所谓的这种，在一种所谓的西方标准讲的叫做美，一种纯粹，一种透彻、通透的这种东西的一种抗拒。所以在这里，其实我想各位在这里面应该都可以感受到，它的色彩其实是在一种非常接近莫兰迪的，蛮接近意大利画家莫兰迪的。那我们知道，莫兰迪的绘画是在整个意大利，其实在一个法西斯时期的时候，整个延续过来的。所以在这里，其实我也多少同意刚才江生讲的或 Boris 讲的，这里面如果我们要寻求它有它任何跟整个那个特殊时代的 那一种所谓的政治空间、政治论述的关系的话，那么我觉得是从他的色调，从他的这种整个创作里面，手去动手去做，去拼凑。所以由这里我们才能了解，他跟岭南或跟所有的当代绘画，不管是岭南还是中国的当代画家，有一个很大的不一样了。他人一定要进到他创作的事物里面，所以也就在这里我们才能看得到他的画弧，整个画是越来越大，会扩充的。他写的书法也不断的要将这个所谓 boundary 这个边界、这个 limit 这个 border 整个东西打开。那我不晓得他究竟是不是有任何的对于像 Jackson Pollock 这些所谓的 action painting、color field 这些的先入为主的，或已经有一些预先知道的知识，但至少我们确定，在他整个创作过程里面，他是由手到整个的身体，到整个的生命里面投进去。他用古琴，他用音乐来将他自己 immerse 进去，将他自己浸泡在里面，就好像他用这些的整个非常庞大、巨大的这些 color field 色彩的这种场域里面呢，来将它整个的不止围绕，而是沉浸生命在里面。所以其实我不晓得有没有误解 Boris 跟他讲的，这里面其实有某一种程度的一种宗教性。这种宗教性不是我们俗称的一种所谓的禅呢，或一种所谓的中国的佛教啦、道家讲的那一种，而是某一种已经跨越了宗教领域里面的一种比较 transcendental 的、比较超越的。其实蛮像 Malevich 在整个的所谓的俄国大革命的前后时候的所画的那些黑色的方块，那些白中白，那些所谓的整个的建构主义的大的，那这是一个非常 unique、非常特殊的。我想，就像博里斯跟他讲的，它的意义不是一层的，它的这种 polysemy 的，它的多重性。它应该会随着时间，望着未来，去不断的延伸出来。也就是说，其实叶世强老师的画，不是给他同一代人看，也不是给我们看，他是给一个不知道什么时候的某一个时间的一个世纪，一个 time， 他开拓了一个完全不一样的 temporality 时间性。这种时间性其实让他能够跨越时代的、政治的，以及或许是他自己的精神心理上的一种困境。我想这是叶世强老师可能一个最大的一个。但我也很高兴，其实我今天下来跟江生讲说，这个 space 是一个很烂的 space， 对不起，我有点不太客气。台湾来怎么可以去批评香港的这种？这事实上并不是一个非常 nice、非常适合一个的。可是问题在江生跟叶先生、叶伟立先生的合作之下，他以一个在这么局限、这么仓促的时间跟这么不好的空间里面呢，选样的在这个叶先生那么多复杂的创作或生活的一些所谓的事件里面呢，他不只给我们看到作品而已，他是给我们看到一些江生或叶先生想象的叶老师的生活的某一些 fragment 的一些残留的 我可不可以这样讲 ？Relic， 他的一些所谓的教授在台湾常讲圣人的所谓的遗骸或残骨在这里，我就大概要讲到
这。谢谢传兴兄，他好像对这个展览比较满意，只是空间不满意，所以我们还要去尽力。是
physical space。
对，我是讲笑话了，感谢感谢。刚才您谈到关于俄罗斯早期先锋派的这几个比喻，可能这个请 Boris Groys 老师来回应是最恰当的，因为他也提过，他看这些画的时候，他也提过关于马勒维奇的黑方的这个问题，还有他从这个黑方的时代跟意义来看叶世强先生的作品。
Well, I agree with what was said about Malevich here. Maybe my general comment will be this one. When we speak about Western art, for example, we should not forget that Western history of Western art is a history of self-rejection. Yeah? A rejection of Christianity during the Renaissance, a rejection of the pictorial tradition of the West during the revolutionary period of avant-garde, Russian avant-garde, but also Western avant-garde. So the tradition of the West is actually a rejection of its own tradition. They never tried to go back to the national tradition, they always tried to reject it. To reject it in the name of a new universalism. New universalism, new openness to the outside world, that also include already Buddhist motifs, especially in American art, of Californian art, yeah. And appropriation of Chinese, Japanese, Eastern tradition took already place in France. And of course, no question about that, Malevich was very strongly influenced by Buddhism, very strongly, but it's Buddhism. Yeah, you know, at the end of 19th century, almost everything was translated in Russian, much more than in the Western languages, because they were specialists in Buddhism, and Indian Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism. In Russia, they translated everything before Western did it. And there was a specific school of Russian Buddhism, not only Buddhist science, but Buddhism itself. And Russian avant-garde was very much influenced in that. For example, Malevich, if you look at Malevich, you see that all his geometrical forms are flowing. Yeah, they are not stabilized like in Mondrian, but they're like flowing on the sea of the white. Yeah, yeah, and that he explains that they are flowing on the surface of Buddhist nothingness. Yeah, it's like they're flowing in the nothing. So these ideas, when we're speaking about the culture of the West, Western culture, yeah, we should not forget that a lot of things that we see in the West are already coming from the East and other parts. So when for example, I say that, yeah, appropriated some images by Barnett Newman or Rothko, we should not forget that Barnett Newman and Rothko were also very much Buddhist. Yeah? So they are already appropriated that. It's a very complicated relationship. And it seems to me that our problem is a complicated one because everyone, be it Russian, be it Chinese, be it American, has a very strange, problematic heritage. Chinese has also a heritage of this kind. Yeah? This problematic heritage is cultural heritage and tradition of rejecting of the heritage. Yeah? In different ways. In America, it's through consumerism and formalism. In China, maybe it's through cultural revolution in different forms. but every country went through this radical rejection. And so if I ask myself as Russian or someone else, what is my tradition? My tradition is tradition and rejection of tradition. And it's a complicated situation, how to navigate, yeah? How to find a way between these two heritages, which is one heritage. If I reject tradition, I am in the tradition. If I appropriate tradition, I'm also in tradition. If I combine, I'm in tradition. So it's difficult. And I think also in these terms, he found a good solution of that. Yeah? I feel also when I look at his work, I feel this difficulty he had. Yeah? Difficulty. What is Chinese tradition? Yeah? How to navigate between its appropriation and continuation and its rejection. Its rejection that is not my rejection. It is a rejection that was already in the tradition itself.
所以，那不是我做的。
三个开始是他会。
好，他会这样子。OK。所以，so this means a dialectic movement. Yeah. 那对不起，我还是习惯讲中文这样子。是，就他刚才讲的，其实应该补充，除了我刚才讲的这种色彩的这种混淆，那他刚才提到这个马勒维奇跟这个莫兰迪早期的时候，在他画九妹翠之前，他画的那些树，那些非常神秘主义的这样子。其实我刚才漏了补充，就说整个这个叶先生的这些色彩系统，各位如果有兴趣，其实除了莫兰迪之外，另外一个美国的大画家 Roscoe， 他本身也是一个，我们就知道跟宗教性、跟整个神秘的那整个的这样子，所以其实都是刚才 Boris 讲的，在这里面其实他们已经到了他的一个，事实上并没有所谓东方的、西方的这种传统，而是一种辩证的。那我比较想好奇的，因为刚才 Boris 在讲，就是说马勒维奇对于佛教的那个，那我所知道的马勒维奇所熟悉的或所接近的这种佛教，是一个比较接近萨满的，也就是所谓的蒙古人的蒙古的佛教。我不晓得我这个认识是不是正确。还有马勒维奇的那个跟当时的，还有对不起，是不是这样？跟当时的俄国这些前卫，像马亚科斯基啊等等的，他这些人的之间的这种关系道理，因为他们之间的这种互动，跟在当时整个大的这种实业革命的这种氛围之下，其实有蛮有趣的这一种所谓的冲撞或前卫的这种经验，这样，这是我比较想知道，不知道 Boris 能不能